The moment I heard her voice behind me, the paper cup in my hand slipped to the ground. After 22 years, I knew that voice instantly. I turned around beneath the bright afternoon sun of our hometown fair and saw the girl I had once loved standing only a few feet away. She looked older, of course, but her smile was still the same, and for several seconds neither of us moved. Then she reached into her handbag, pulled out a faded envelope, and asked the question I had never expected to hear. "Why did you never answer my letter?" I felt the noise of the fair disappear around me. The children, the carnival rides, the music, the laughter, all of it seemed to fade until there was only her and the past I had spent half my life trying to forget. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the possibility that people can find their way back to each other, please like this story, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House. Because sometimes, one unanswered letter can carry an entire lifetime of pain. My name is Everett, and I had returned to my hometown after nearly 2 decades away. My mother had recently decided to move closer to my sister, and I had come back to help clean the old family house before it was sold. I had expected the visit to be uncomfortable, but I never expected it to awaken memories I had carefully buried. The town looked smaller than I remembered. The grocery store still stood on the same corner, the old movie theater still had its faded red sign, and the fairgrounds looked almost exactly as they had when I was 17. My mother had encouraged me to visit the annual fair that afternoon, saying that I had spent too many years working and worrying and not enough time remembering how to enjoy ordinary life. So I went, mostly to make her happy. I walked between food stalls, watched children carrying balloons, and listened to the distant sound of the Ferris wheel. Then I heard that voice. Her name was Seraphina Vale. In high school, everyone knew her. She was bright without being arrogant, kind without expecting anything in return, and somehow able to make even the quietest person feel noticed. I had been the quiet boy who sat near the window, worked after school at a mechanic's garage, and wore the same 2 jackets through most of the winter. I never imagined someone like Seraphina would notice me. But she did. She started sitting beside me during lunch. She would ask about my day, borrow my notes, and sometimes walk with me after school even when her friends were waiting for her. I fell in love with her slowly, silently, and completely. I never told her because I was terrified that if she knew, she would disappear. During our final year, my family fell into serious financial trouble. My father lost his job, my younger sister needed expensive treatment, and suddenly college was no longer something I could think about. I planned to leave town immediately after graduation and find work wherever I could. Seraphina knew I was leaving, but she didn't know how desperate things had become. On our final day of school, she handed me an envelope and told me not to open it until I was alone. I promised I would read it that night. But that evening, everything at home fell apart. My father and I argued. My mother was crying. Bills covered the kitchen table. Before sunrise, I was on a bus heading 3 states away with 1 suitcase and almost no money. I carried that envelope in my jacket pocket. At least, I thought I did. Months later, after moving from one temporary job to another, I realized it was gone. I searched my suitcase repeatedly, checked boxes, called my mother, and even contacted the school office, but I never found it. I eventually convinced myself that maybe Seraphina had only written something friendly. Maybe she had wished me luck. Maybe I had imagined the connection between us. Life became survival. I worked construction, then warehouse jobs, then eventually built a small repair business. Years passed. I dated occasionally, but I never allowed myself to become truly close to anyone. Somewhere inside me, a 17-year-old boy was still waiting to know what that letter had said. And now she was standing in front of me. Seraphina looked at me for several seconds before smiling nervously. She told me she had recognized me immediately. I asked her how she could possibly recognize me after so many years. She laughed softly and said there were some faces the heart remembered better than the eyes did. Then she reached into her bag again. The envelope she held wasn't the original. She explained that she had kept a copy of the letter because she had once been afraid that I might lose it. My hands began to shake. She told me she had waited for my response. When none came, she assumed I had rejected her. That revelation hurt more than I could explain. I told her that I had never received the letter after leaving town. She looked stunned. For years, she had believed I had read every word and simply decided she wasn't important enough to answer. I had spent those same years believing she had forgotten me. We had both been carrying the wrong story. We walked through the fair together that afternoon. We talked about the people we had become, the jobs we had taken, the parents we had lost, the dreams that had changed, and the mistakes we wished we could undo. She told me she had become a school counselor because she wanted young people to know that difficult circumstances did not mean their lives were over. I told her about the business I had built from almost nothing. Neither of us talked about love at first. We were simply trying to understand the years between us. Then she took me to the old lemonade stand near the center of the fairgrounds. She reminded me that when we were 17, I had spent almost an hour trying to win her a stuffed fox at a game booth because she had once told me foxes were her favorite animals. I laughed because I had completely forgotten. She hadn't. She told me she still had that little stuffed fox in a box at home. That was when I realized something. Maybe the past hadn't disappeared. Maybe we had simply stopped looking at it from the right direction. As the afternoon sunlight stretched across the fairground, Seraphina finally showed me the copied letter. I read it slowly. She had written that she admired my strength, that she believed I would build a good life, and that she hoped I would never let difficult circumstances convince me that I wasn't worthy of happiness. Near the bottom, she had written that she cared about me more than she had ever been brave enough to say aloud. The final sentence made my eyes fill with tears. She had asked me to find her someday if I still remembered her. I looked up and realized she was crying too. I told her that I had remembered her every year. She told me she had remembered me too. But neither of us pretended that 22 years could simply disappear. We had lived entire lives during those years. We had changed, struggled, grown, and learned. We couldn't return to being teenagers, and maybe we weren't supposed to. What we could do was stop allowing an old misunderstanding to decide what happened next. Before we left the fair, we stood near the Ferris wheel watching families climb into the bright red cabins. Seraphina smiled and said that perhaps some people don't meet again because they are meant to repeat the past. Perhaps they meet again because they finally understand it. The next morning, I called her. Not because I knew what the future would bring. Not because I expected some perfect movie ending. I called because for the first time in 22 years, I wasn't afraid to answer. We met for breakfast that morning at a small cafe near the old school. We talked for hours. We laughed about embarrassing memories, cried over people we had lost, and discovered that despite everything, the friendship that had once meant so much to us was still there. Maybe love had survived too. Maybe it had simply been waiting beneath years of silence. Sometimes life doesn't give us the chance to rewrite the past. But it gives us something just as precious, the opportunity to stop letting the past control the future. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House. Your support helps these stories reach someone who may need their message today. And before you leave, comment, "I believe in second chances," if you believe that one mistake, one misunderstanding, or one lost opportunity should never be allowed to define an entire lifetime. Because sometimes the person you thought had forgotten you has been carrying your memory all along. Sometimes the letter you never answered becomes the question that brings two people back together. And sometimes, the greatest second chance isn't getting your old life back, it is finally having the courage to answer when life knocks on your door again.